In this video, I'm going to be walking you through the step-by-step process to building an authentic and profitable personal brand as an entrepreneur, and actually how to convert clients with your content. If you don't know me, I'm Jack. I have 80,000 followers. I'm a content strategist for the School of Hard Knocks, and I help entrepreneurs grow their business with content for a living. What you're about to see is a call recording of a presentation I gave on personal branding to a group of business owners. And there's a ton of value in there. If you actually implement what I talk about in this call, you're going to be ahead of 99% of entrepreneurs in terms of building a personal brand and actually growing your business with content. All right, hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. All right, guys, thanks for having me. Thanks, Keenan, for inviting me. It's awesome to be here. Especially a lot of you guys are content guys with agencies, business owners. Those are kind of the people I love talking to and working with. So I'm really excited. I'm basically going to go over in the next maybe 40 minutes approximately how to build a profitable personal brand. So I'm going to go into a little bit of credibility here in a second, but this is what I do every day. I have a personal branding coaching consulting offer that I work with business owners inside of. I again work for the School of Hard Knocks, so I'm really excited to get started here. Just kind of in terms of what we're going to actually go over on this call, I kind of want to touch on all the important parts of building a personal brand. To me, these are kind of the 8 or 9 main components that once you dial these in and really have a good understanding of this, these are going to really unlock that growth in terms of following, audience, and ultimately leads and clients for your business. Cool. So let's get into it. So who am I and why should you listen to me, right? So I'm Jack. I basically help entrepreneurs and business owners build personal brands and ultimately grow their business with organic content. As I was kind of mentioning earlier, I'm a content strategist for the School of Hard Knocks. They have more than kind of 20 million followers across platforms at this point. And so again, I work inside there one-on-one with I think 15 or 16 business owners right now who are making kind of between 20 to, in some cases, $1 million a month with their business and really understand the power of organic content. And so I help them leverage that to basically grow. I have almost 83,000 followers. The current clients that I'm working with for my own business, outside of the School of Hard Knocks, are making more than $3 million a month. I've had F1 drivers reach out. I've worked with a bunch of different cool businesses. So I'm excited to kind of share the insights and knowledge that I've gained in the last few years with you guys today. So first, let's kind of talk about, what is a personal brand? It's kind of a buzzword, right? Everyone wants to build a personal brand, but, a lot of times don't know exactly what that actually means. To me, a personal brand is ultimately kind of 3 things, right? A traffic source, a trust driver, and a conversion mechanism for your business. So here's this chart. This is how I like to visualize the personal brand. And so in its simplest form, I want you to look at the left-hand side, anti-vision, and the right-hand side, the vision. Ultimately, your goal with your personal brand is to help your client, your ideal client, your dream follower, whatever you want to call it, move away from the anti-vision and towards the vision, right? So the anti-vision on the left-hand side is basically the life that you and your client are working away from, whether that's, not wanting to work a 9-to-5 job, wanting to grow your business, right? Not wanting to be fat, especially if you're, in the workout niche, like all these different things that you're working to actively avoid. And on the right-hand side, there's the vision. So this is kind of like the dream life that you're working towards. And the whole idea here is that you're a few steps ahead of your client or your follower, which is why they're going to follow you and why they're going to want to work with you. So this is how I kind of like to visualize a personal brand, right? You and your client are both trying to move away from the anti-vision and towards the vision, but you're just a few steps ahead of them on that journey. And so that is what's going to give you credibility to actually teach, to educate, and ultimately, convert your followers into clients. So kind of looking at this a little bit more, the 3 key components of a personal brand that actually, converts and actually grows your business is relatability, authority, and, inspirational or aspirational, whatever you want to call it. And so this kind of version of a personal brand has all 3. Right? You're relatable to your ideal client or your follower because you've both been at the same point and you're working to move away from it, which intrinsically makes you relatable. You are working towards something and you're further ahead than your ideal follower or client, which makes you aspirational. And this gap between the knowledge that you have and the knowledge that your client has is It's what I call the authority gap. And the wider this gap is, the more you're going to be able to charge for your service, right? And so basically what fills this gap then is your unique mechanism, whether that's an agency, whether that's coaching, consulting, e-com. The whole point is that your product or service is going to basically close this authority gap. And that's really what a personal brand is for me. So I want to talk about brand outliers, which is kind of the first key concept that I get all my clients to start with when I actually start working with them. And basically brand outliers are the unique and or impressive things about you that make you and your brand memorable and credible, right? And so there's really two types of brand outliers. There's what I call external brand outliers, which are things that you can basically kind of see and observe, right? So, your money, your monthly income, your results, the results that you've gotten for your clients, for yourself, the lifestyle that you live, titles, like for instance, for me, working with School of Hard Knocks, that would be an external brand outlier. And there's also internal brand outliers. So these are a little bit more difficult to see just from looking at someone or, doing some research. You wouldn't necessarily be able to tell these brand outliers from that, right? And these are things like your personal story, the mindset you developed, the character that you have, the beliefs that you have, like these things that are internal. And the whole idea is that in order to build an authentic and profitable personal brand, you need to leverage both of these in your content. So the external brand outliers are the things that are going to, attract attention and get the initial audience onto your page. And then the internal brand outliers are like, once they're on your page, these are the things that build connection, build trust, build authenticity. And so with every client I work with, we always start by basically understanding, okay, what are those external and internal brand outliers that you have that we can leverage into your content? So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this is a really important topic. If you don't have, things like this written down, the things that make you unique and credible, you should definitely have a list of that. And a lot of times I love to use these brand outliers in hooks, especially the external brand outliers. So I'll give you an example. For me, I used to make a lot of videos where I was like, I'm 22 with 70,000 followers and I make, $40K a month with content. And then I go into the rest of my video. Again, those are all external brand outliers. They're not talking about my character, my beliefs, my mindset, anything like that, but they are impressive to other people, if that makes sense. And those videos, tended to go viral and get a lot of views because people wanted those things as well. Next, I want to talk about ideation, right? I find ideation is one of the biggest problems, or people just get it wrong and they don't know how to do it. They're like, I don't know what to talk about in my content, or I don't know what to create about. And so I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about this problem. And I've come up with kind of 3 methods that ideally, to get the best ideas, you're kind of running, simultaneously. So the first kind of source of ideas is going to be from your business, right? So for me, I have a setter. My setter communicates with a lot of people in the DMs. There's naturally going to be questions, limiting beliefs, problems, right? Frequently asked questions that people ask my setter. And his job is going to then be to communicate those to me and let me know, hey, we're getting a lot of questions about, this, or I think this guide would be really valuable, or you should make a video on this topic, right? So that's number 1. The second really good source of inspiration and ideas is speaking to your clients, right? The people who've actually paid you for their service. That's arguably the best source of inspiration and ideas because, the frequently asked questions that they bring up, the reasons they tell you that they bought from you, like, let's just double down on that type of content, right? And just make more of that to attract more clients. And the last part of, this first section is really like your onboarding form. So hopefully all of you, have some sort of onboarding form when you onboard clients, but it's really important to ask the right questions on this form. Specifically for me, the main questions I ask that pertain to this are, was there a specific piece of content that you watched that, prompted you to reach out and potentially buy? And the second part is, what is the main part of my brand that made you want to work with me? Those 2 questions are so valuable for finding winning content ideas. So if you don't have questions like that on your onboarding forms, I definitely recommend you include those. The second method, I'm not going to go quite as long in this one. I call it the scroll save method. It's basically, when you're scrolling Instagram throughout the day, we're probably all scrolling a little bit too much. I like to save videos from basically competitors or people in my niche, videos that I feel like, I could make my own version of that, or this video did really well. It's from someone in my niche. Like I could definitely recreate that. And basically, instead of just liking it or sending it to yourself on Instagram, add it to a saved collection. And you can make it a shared collection. You could just make it a saved collection. So on my phone right now, I have two collections. I have one that's like value videos, and then I have one that's more authentic or like documentation videos. And so when I do go to ideate, I sometimes just scroll through this content idea bank, and it's basically, a bank of winning ideas for me to choose from at that point, which again saves me like hours a week on ideation. The last thing I want to note is it's like, how do I decide which of the ideas I see on Instagram are worth saving to this collection? And I like to filter it kind of based on two criteria, right? So the first is resonance. And by resonance, I mean like, does this video actually relate to me? Do I feel a connection to this topic? Do I want to speak on this video, right? Do I want to create a video on this topic? The second is reach, right? So objectively, how well did the video do? It's one thing to really connect to a video if you're like, oh wow, I love talking about this topic. But if the video got, 10 likes, it's like, okay, maybe it's not a winning idea. So maybe I won't prioritize that. So before you save anything to the collection, definitely kind of analyze it based on personal resonance and objective reach as well. The last part is what I call active ideation. So this is where we start kind of leveraging AI and software to help filter winning ideas. So I use, this software called Sandcastles AI. It's by this creator Callaway. You might have heard of him. He's pretty big on YouTube. But anyways, he's created this software, and so I have this creator watch list. So I basically add all my competitors, all the people who make content that is kind of in my niche that I think I could take inspiration from or I look up to, and then I basically filter those ideas by what's called outlier score. And an outlier score is basically, so an outlier score of 5, for example, would mean, this video did at least 5 times better than that creator's average views. So by filtering, all my creator watch list by, 3, 5, or even 10 an outlier score, I see basically the videos that performed at least 5 to 10 times better than their average views, which allows me to really quickly understand, okay, wow, this is a really good idea. This content performed way better than average. So it's worth paying attention to and thinking maybe I can make my own version of this. So that is ideation. Next, I want to talk about formats here. So formats are incredibly important and probably underrated at this point, but they're basically, once you have the idea, which we just went over, how do you actually package that idea into something that people are going to want to watch and is going to do well on social media? So the way I think about formats there's kind of top of funnel formats, middle of funnel formats, and then bottom of funnel formats. So top of funnel formats are things that are really easy to consume. You don't really need to script anything. It's stuff like, ratings, comparisons, tier lists, viral reaction videos, stuff like that, that you don't necessarily need to be really experienced in, content strategy or, make money professionally online to really understand these videos. The whole point is that they're short, they're broad, and they're going to actually attract, a new audience to your page. The second is middle of funnel content ideas. And so these content ideas or these formats are likely not going to get as many views as the top of funnel formats, but they're going to bring more depth, right? More authority, more trust to your content because you're actually connecting more with your audience. So in terms of formats that kind of do this, talking head videos, iPhone app videos, green screen videos, and then even something like a week in the life video just gives more kind of behind the scenes to who you actually are as a person, like how you're running your business. And the whole point is, the top of funnel formats attract, the middle of funnel formats nurture and really show these guys who just started following you, who is Jack? What can I actually help you with? And then, the last type is bottom of funnel formats. So these are likely going to get kind of the fewest views, but in terms of conversion are really, really strong. Obviously, client interviews, Miro board breakdowns, and podcast clips are really good bottom of funnel content pieces because they do a lot in terms of actually converting your audience, to being paying clients. The key here is that you kind of need all three. You need top, middle, and bottom of funnel formats to 1, attract the audience, 2, nurture the audience with middle of funnel, and then 3, actually convert the audience with the bottom of funnel formats. I'm always looking for new formats. Like I'm constantly, trying to find new ideas that I haven't seen a lot of people doing. And I just love working with formats. Last thing in terms of like, how do you actually find a winning format? Because I think it's really important. The first stage is like research, right? So find winning ideas either in your niche or outside of your niche and basically understand, okay, is this format that this creator is using feasible? So for instance, for me, if I don't have a videographer to travel, around with me and film me, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, or wouldn't be as feasible to do like a week in the life vlog style video, right? Whereas a format where my camera's on a tripod and I'm speaking to the camera as a solo creator, that would make a lot more sense, right? So I recommend spending 1 week on actually researching which formats you want to start testing. Then second, testing, right? So in terms of how to actually test formats effectively, I like to, for a given format, have 3 posts, right? So if I'm doing a comparison type of format where it's like I'm choosing this versus this for social media or something like that, I'm gonna make 3 videos inside that format before actually looking at the performance, right? Because if I post one, it could be an outlier. If I post another one, I just need a little bit more data to make better decisions based on the formats that I want to be creating. And so I recommend kind of spending about 2 weeks to actually start testing these formats and kind of decide on the ones that you actually want to go with. And then, the last part is doubling down on the winning ones, right? The whole point is that we're trying to find your winning format. And, the same format could perform really well for one creator and really poorly for another creator. And you just need to understand, which is going to perform well for you. And all you can do is test to kind of find that answer. And again, I recommend doubling down for 2 weeks on the winning formats. And so this is really like a 5-week cycle. So for instance, I'm in the process of doubling down on my winning formats right now. Next week, I'll be going back into the research phase and actually kind of restarting this process again. So this is a really valuable part about how to actually kind of find formats. I'm seeing some questions here. I'm gonna get to these a little bit later. So don't worry about that. Next, I want to talk about scripting. So, for me personally, scripting better and really understanding how to tell stories more effectively, I think is the main factor that allowed me to go from, 2,000 views or less in like September of 2025 to consistently generating about, at least 100K video per week now. This video at this point, I think is almost at 200K. This is almost at 200K. This is like 120K. But scripting and storytelling is really the key factor for me that allowed my account to blow up and really my business at the end of the day as well. So the way I think about scripting is kind of there's 2 main scripting types, right? So there's value videos where you're sharing tactics, how-tos, step-by-step and unique insights into your industry. And then there's more like that personal storytelling. So talking about lessons you've learned, talking about, adversity that you went through. Like I call it like the hero's journey story. Talking about belief shifts that you've had and ultimately stories about change. So talking about big changes in your life and your business, things like that. And the whole point is that we kind of need both. Again, like I talked about earlier with the brand outliers, we need both value and storytelling in terms of the type of videos and the types of scripts that we're making. And the idea is that at the end of the day, value is going to build trust and prove that you're an authority. But the storytelling is going to build connection and differentiation, right? Because there's a bunch of content guys, there's a bunch of agency owners online. Information is kind of everywhere at this point. So what's going to separate you and make your brand, a personal brand instead of just a commodity brand? It's not going to be the value. It's probably going to be the storytelling and the unique journey that you've been on that your ideal client or your dream follower is going to resonate with. And so I want to give you even more value. I'm going to share this presentation with you guys at the end so you can kind of have this, but how do you actually like script each of the 2 types of stories? This is the formula that I use. I'm not going to go like crazy in depth on it, but I have a bunch of other kind of free resources on this as well. But the whole point is, if I'm scripting a value video, I'm going to start with, a brand outlier like we talked about earlier. Like I'm 22 with 80,000 followers. I make 50K a month with content, and here's how to never run out of content ideas, right? That would be an example. Then I would move on to an amplifier. So an amplifier is almost like a second hook. So for instance, in the example I just shared, my amplifier could be, and it only takes 5 minutes, right? Something to make the value I'm about to give seem even better, even easier to execute, even more important to listen to. This is a small little step. And then, the next part is actually going into the value. So the way I think about, how do you actually communicate value in your videos if you're trying to educate someone, start with like step 1, right? Step 1, and then the name of that step. Next, you talk about what most people do wrong. So kind of like the old way of doing things, why that old way is wrong, because you can't just tell someone that they're wrong. You need to actually give them kind of a logical reason why their way of thinking or why what they've been doing up until this point is wrong for them to actually buy into it. And then the last part is really like the right way of doing things or your way of doing things. And by kind of using this 4-step framework, it basically positions you as an authority and shifts the beliefs of your audience, which ultimately is going to be one of the key reasons that they're going to buy from you, because they understand that you know the right way of doing things and they don't. So for each of like the 3 steps, for example, in this video, you would kind of use this 4-step framework, if that makes sense. The next part is creating an open loop. And so I don't hear many people at all talk about this part in terms of scripting your storytelling. The open loop is basically setting up the call to action, right? A lot of times we have call to actions at the end of our videos. We want people to comment, a keyword. We're going to send them the free resource. We're going to collect their name. We're going to collect their email. They're going to get on our list. Then we're going to start following up in the DMs, all this stuff. But none of that's going to actually happen if they don't, actually comment the call to action when you tell them to, right? So the whole point of an open loop is to really emphasize that all this value I just gave you is great, but none of it's really going to work as well as you want it to unless you have this next step, which is inside this lead magnet, which is what you're going to have to comment for. So that's like a small little psychological thing that I throw in at the end of my videos before the call to action, which is one of the main reasons that, a lot of my videos have like thousands of comments of people commenting for lead magnets, and that my setter is able to reach out and ultimately get guys on calls from them commenting. So I think that's a really important part of this whole scripting framework. And then, the storytelling framework is very similar, right? Brand outlier, amplifier, open loop, and call to action. The only difference is instead of kind of giving tactical value, you're actually sharing your story. And it's like, okay, how do I tell my story? How do I structure my story, right? That's probably the next question. This 4-step framework is really effective to do that. So first, talk about the before state, or basically where you were, and you weren't happy about it, kind of before the change. Then you talk about the realization that you made. So for instance, I'll give you an example. So for me, before I grew a profitable personal brand, I was posting every day, I was editing all my own content, and I was making no money. That would be the before state, right? Then for the realization, I would say, then I looked at the creators online who I was following and who were making money from their content, and I realized they were doing things completely differently. Right? So that would be the realization. Then the next section is the change. So based on the realization, what did I change? What were the new things that I started doing? So for instance, in my story example, I'd say, I completely stopped editing my own videos. I outsourced to an editing team. I spent all my time, making sure I was doing content research and actually finding winning ideas. So I wasn't guessing when I was posting, right? And then the last step 4, is the outcome. So based on the change I made, what changed for myself? So for instance, in this story again, the outcome would be, my account blew up. I gained, 10,000 followers in a few weeks, and I started signing brand deals with my personal brand. So this is like the simplified storytelling structure that I've used, for the last few months that has gotten me consistent, 10, 20, 50, even 100, 200K view videos. And so I know that it works. It's just a matter of actually applying it to your own situation. Cool. I see a couple other questions. I'm going to get to this. I have a couple more slides left, and then I'm going to answer all these questions. Next step is workflow. So how do I actually create content, high quality content consistently? Especially, we're all business owners here. We're trying to deal with, sales, marketing, fulfillment. It's a lot of work. And so if you don't actually have the right game plan and the weekly workflow, it's going to be really, really hard to stay consistent with content. I've experimented with a ton of different ways of doing this. But the way that I found best is this workflow that I have right now. It's basically batching content. So on Monday, I spend about an hour on ideation, on content research. And I usually try to come up with 5 to 7, content ideas that I want to create about. Tuesday, I'm going to do my scripting. So based on those 5 to 7 ideas I have on Monday, now I'm going to script all 5 to 7 of them. A lot of times I don't actually need to script for all of them because they're formats that don't require scripting. But for the ones I do script on Tuesday. Again, this only takes like an hour usually. On Wednesday is my filming day. So I filmed for like 2 hours yesterday, filmed all my content for the week. Usually it takes like an hour and a half. Again, filming all 5 to 7 videos. And then Thursday is what I call like organization. So for me, I'm lucky I have an editing team. So I basically just color grade my videos and then export them and kind of link them in my content pipeline. But that's really all I do on Thursday. And so this takes me about 4 to 5 hours a week total on content, which allows me to post, consistently 5 to 7 times a week. And obviously the more consistent we can be, the faster you're going to grow your personal brand and ultimately grow your business. So I definitely recommend kind of using this workflow. If, for instance, you edit all your own stuff, you can use Thursday as like an editing day and then push Friday to kind of the organizing day. But again, it's a really simple structure. The last thing I'll say about workflow is you need to block off time in your calendar or else it won't happen. Meetings come up, last minute things. If you don't block out, systematically like an hour a day and label it in your calendar, you're not going to be able to do this consistently. So I definitely recommend doing that. I'm just going to answer this question. How come I color grade my content first, then I give it to the editors? I just don't trust anyone else to color grade my content. Color grading is kind of my thing. It's a main reason my brand, has done so well, and I actually enjoy doing it. So that's kind of the reason I color grade. I could give it to my editors, but I just rather do it myself, honestly. Cool, guys. We're almost near the end. There's just a couple things. I want to talk about tracking. So, we're posting this content. We're kind of hoping it brings in followers and leads, but at the end of the day, a lot of us aren't actually tracking. So there's 3 main tracking tools that I use that I'm gonna walk you through really quickly. The first is a content pipeline. So this is where I plan and execute all my content. So it's basically, I have ideas on the left. When I'm done ideating, I move each idea into the scripting section. When I'm done scripting, I move that into filming. And it just basically allows me to keep track of all the content that I'm doing. Once I'm done filming, I move it into the editing pipeline. Then from there, my editor moves it to the next one as he goes through and edits. And then when the video is posted, I move it into here. Again, if you don't use something like this, I think most of you probably do, but you should definitely have some sort of content pipeline, content tracker where you store all your ideas. You have your scripts. It's kind of all in one place. And so I use Notion for this, but obviously there's a bunch of different ways to do it. But you should definitely have some sort of content pipeline. The next part is the content tracker, right? So once I actually post the videos, I'm not just kind of posting and forgetting about them. Every week, I basically update, or my VA updates the metrics from the video, right? So I track the views, the followers, the saves, the comments, the shares, and the followers per 1,000 views, which is really important because a lot of times, a video might get a ton of views, so you think, oh, like that's the best way to grow my account, but it actually didn't bring in the most followers. Whereas, a video that got fewer views actually brought in, twice the followers. So that's a really important number to pay attention to and to track. And then the last part is like, I just rate my videos based on usually like the followers per 1,000K or the views, and just kind of have a good sense of, was this video good or was this video not very good in terms of performance? So the last tracker I actually have is like a lead tracker. And so I get my setter to update this ideally daily. Usually it's like every second day, but when a follower comes in, especially if it's qualified, if it's, they seem like they're qualified, I have their Instagram @ I have the lead quality kind of out of 10. I have the niche that they're in. This is really important. I have the source video that they come from, right? So then I can look back and say, wow, like all of my 8 or 9, really qualified leads came from like these couple videos. So now I know that I should double down on that type of content. And then I also have kind of like an outreach status. Have I messaged them? Have we interacted? What stage of the conversation are we in right now? Then I have kind of the date that they've been added, and then any notes that the setter has for me as well. So this is super important. I've only actually been doing it the last couple months, but it's been really helpful in terms of helping me understand, what type of content should I double down on, and basically how can I grow my business more efficiently. The last part is really AI, like how am I using it? Which I think, a lot of people are trying to figure out, especially in content. How can I use it to save me time, to make better content, to automate, as much as possible? So I really have kind of three main ways that I'm using it. I have an agent on Claude that helps me with content research. So the agent basically goes in, tries to find winning formats, winning content ideas in terms of performance from like a set list of competitors I've given them, finds those competitors' outliers, and basically gives me the topic of that video, and also does kind of trend research in my industry and sends me like a morning update about, you know, new developments in content marketing, content research, personal branding, so that I kind of know if there's any big events that I should be paying attention to or looking into, basically. The second part is scripting. So I write most of my own scripts. I mainly use AI to help refine the scripts. That said, for some of my clients, especially who don't care about, you know, writing word for word their scripts and would rather just kind of have them done and good enough, I have this skill inside Claude that basically refines short form scripts. It can also write YouTube intros, which I find are really important, and also like structured lead magnets of free resources that I'm giving out, whether that's kind of like a Google Doc PDF, a Notion document, or a YouTube video, like I have with the YouTube intros. So I have this skill. And then kind of the last part, I have this content dashboard, which I'm going to show you in a second, which helps with organization. So it automatically pulls from Slack client messages if they've messaged me inside School of Hard Knocks. It reminds me if I'm kind of falling behind on my weekly content flow, depending on where I am in the week. And it just helps me with daily operations, shows me my meetings for the upcoming day, all these small little things which help me kind of as a solopreneur run my business more effectively. So those are the three main ways that I'm really using AI. And this is kind of what my content dashboard looks like. There's obviously a ton of tabs, but I love seeing my followers go up every day, my YouTube subscribers, email list, my my revenue for the month so far. I have unread messages, I have today's tasks, I have meetings, and then a bunch of other stuff. But I built this whole database with Claude Code, which is really sick. So I'm having a lot of fun kind of experimenting with that. But guys, that's really the end of the presentation. I think I went over everything that I wanted to. I know there's a bunch of questions in the meeting chat here, but yeah, thanks, Keenan. I really appreciate this opportunity. It was great to speak to you guys. Definitely feel free to drop me a follow, reach out on Instagram, and happy to share more information as well.